To start with, what do you mean by woke?
Well, what woke was originally intended to mean, and it derived from African American music in the 60s, was an awareness of social and racial injustice. And by that definition, I'm happy to say I'm woke. Unfortunately, what's happened in the last few years is it got hijacked by the so-called progressive left. And I've always identified politically myself as probably slightly left of centre, liberal, especially with social values. And I suddenly discovered I had nothing in common with the so-called progressive left. Literally nothing. I couldn't think of anything that they stood for which made any sense to me. And this was the woke left, as it became, spewing wokeism into the ether, or as Elon Musk calls it, the woke mind virus. And I wrote the book because I genuinely think it's been one of the more insidious things that's happened to any free democratic society in my lifetime. And I'm very glad it's on the way out. It's not actually dead yet. And rather like a garden, we're going to have to watch the roots and watch the weeds and make sure it doesn't sprout again. But I certainly think it's been very damaging to the way that we try to lead our lives freely.
Not everyone's going to accept that, the definition, but for simplicity for here, we'll refer to it as woke. Why do you think it's coming to an end?
I think people's tolerance of it has come to an end. So if people want to know why Donald Trump got re-elected in America, for example, yes, it was the economy, yes, it was immigration, but actually a third plank of his win, and he'll say this, was that at his core was, as he put it, a core of common sense. And that included, for example, saying that biological males cannot compete in women's sport. I think we'll look back in 20, 30 years, if not earlier, at this period where it was actively encouraged for biological men to compete in women's sport if they identified as women, and see it as a period of complete lunacy. Not because I'm remotely transphobic. I think trans people should have full respect. They should be afforded the same rights to equality and safety as I get, and fairness, but not at the expense of women's rights. And it was frankly scandalous what was going on. So I think that, you know, the reason Donald Trump got re-elected, in the main, he spoke a language that the majority of people thought, well, that makes sense. And the problem
but the argument there would not be, okay, woke is seen as being intolerant. Is President Trump not also seen as being intolerant, just from a different direction?
Well, he can be, and the woke right is a real thing, and I make that point in the book. I don't think it's just a problem on the left. I think that, you know, my sort of place on this as a starting point is free speech. And I think one of the worst things about wokeism has been the assault on free speech. The idea that you can't express yourself freely. You can't say what you really believe, because someone is going to get up and say that you're hateful, you're something ending in ist or ick, you're sexist, you're racist, you're homophobic, whatever you are. And often the person who's saying whatever they want to say is none of those things. And it's done as a stick to beat them and bully them and cajole them into signing up to the woke worldview. And the problem with that worldview is it's very narrow, it's very joyless, it's very puritanical. It involves cancelling a lot of people for saying the wrong thing, for liking the wrong movie.
But does President Trump not do the same thing?
Well, occasionally, I'm not here to say everything Donald Trump does is right. I'm just explaining the reason he got re-elected is that actually many Americans saw him as the antidote to this stuff. Now, is he prone on his revenge tour, as a lot of what is happening recently could be categorized, to a bit of this stuff himself? Yes, he is, you know, quite happily trying to silence comedians and so on. I don't agree with that part of it. I think it applies to everybody, whether you're on the left or the right or the centre. Suppression of free speech is a dangerous thing. It only happens in totalitarian countries. There's a reason that America and the UK and Australia and other countries pride themselves on being free democratic societies. But you've got to defend that freedom with extreme passion and care.
You talk in the book early on about the election of President Trump being elected during an era of Me Too, of Black Lives Matter, of My Truth. And particularly Me Too, what's so wrong with that? Surely serious misbehaviour should be called out.
100%, and I make the point that a lot of these things, the genesis of it and the idea behind it is very laudable. You know, Black Lives Matter was a perfectly laudable way for the world to respond to the grotesque murder of George Floyd by a policeman that we all witnessed on the cell phone footage, which was horrific. But like a lot of these movements, it became way too extreme. And by becoming extreme, it lost its purpose. And you saw people being rounded up all the time for the most tiny things, for not expressing their anti-racism sentiment strongly enough. You saw university professors having to lose their jobs for just not saying things with enough verve and passion for the woke brigade. And it's like, come on, this guy's on your side. Why are you doing this to him? Why are you trashing and vilifying and cancelling people who intrinsically are on your side? So I felt the pendulum swung way too far. And I think what we're seeing now is a correction of that. Was Me Too a good campaign? Absolutely. Was everyone rounded up in it a Harvey Weinstein? No. Were people being rounded up who actually turned out to have done nothing much very wrong? Yes. So like a lot of these purges, it went a little bit too far. And I think what we're seeing now, hopefully, is a genuine correction to a place of what I would categorise as common sense, where you can still be allowed to behave and speak freely, but within the confines of the existing law.
You talk about diversity, inclusion, equality being a template for mediocrity, but we do see people from minorities in very significant positions. Surely that's got to be a good thing.
Of course, and I want everyone to have exactly the same opportunity from the grassroots up.
So how do you get that without...
Well, what you don't get it by actually promoting mediocrity over meritocracy. Life should be a meritocracy. In America, they've had a black president of the United States when nobody thought they would. There is genuine meritocracy now at all levels, I think, of all aspects of society in America, and the same in the UK. I don't think you can say anymore that the colour of your skin determines whether you can be successful in pretty much any industry in this country. Does it mean that the problem is completely resolved? That nobody is judged adversely because of the colour of their skin? No, sadly not. You'll always have racists in a country. But Britain is one of the least racist places that I know. And I've travelled a lot around the world. And I think you've got to get this diversity, equity, inclusion thing. There's a reason so many companies around the world now are going back on it and not doing it anymore. They recognise that in their effort to promote racial equality, actually what they were promoting was a new inequality, a new unfairness. They were punishing people actually for the colour of their skin, but in reverse. So if you were a white person going for the same job, but you were more qualified, often you weren't getting that job. That can't be right. So what you really want is genuine equality from the grassroots up, so that you have genuine diversity. We're one of the most diverse countries in the world. You have equality and inclusion. I'm up for all those. Just don't make it a place where it doesn't matter how good you are, you get judged according to the colour of your skin, in the converse way to what it used to be, which was an adverse thing, to now you're going to get promoted just because you happen to be non-white. I don't think that's right either.
You must be the only person who I've heard criticise Adolescence, which you say that, which was a triumph everywhere.
Well, yeah, it won a lot of awards, and it was very well acted. I don't remotely take that away from them. But for me, it was just a bit of a lazy trope. It's like the kid was always going to be a young white boy.
Is that a particular issue?
No, it wasn't. It was actually, in fact, it was a young boy, young man. If people wonder why people like Andrew Tate get such momentum with young men, it's precisely because of that kind of selection process about who you make a story about young boys behaving badly. And I think they gravitate to people like Tate because, Tate says some things I agree with, many things I don't agree with. I think he's a horrible misogynist, for example. But he says a lot of things which young men gravitate to because actually they feel like society now views them all as that young man in adolescence. And I think that's a shame. It just felt very stereotypical to me. It's like another stick to beat these young guys with. It's like, come on, surely you should be helping them.
Finally, and on a different track, you were a newspaper editor, a very young newspaper editor. You were then a presenter of a very prominent TV programme. And you're now your own programme on YouTube. You've kind of charted the change in media. What has happened and where's it going, do you think?
Well, you won't want to hear this, but television is basically screwed in its conventional form. But a bit like when the penny farthing used to be the preferred way that people got about on two wheels. And then the Harley Davidson came along. It's doing the same thing, it's just doing it a lot faster. Young people don't watch television. In America, cable news average audience age is 70, for example. In the UK, the average audience ages for a lot of shows now is skewing very older. Young people watch streamers and they watch YouTube. And in fact, in America now, 12% of television watchers watch television through the YouTube app on their smart TV. this is the way it's all going to go. So in 2 to 3 years, the number one way that most people watch conventional television will be through the YouTube app on my smart television. And I like my YouTube channel, which now has over 4 million subscribers, because people can watch the content whenever they want. I'm not ordering them to watch it as I was originally when I was doing a TV version of the same thing. You have to watch it at 8 o'clock at night or you'll miss it because it's live. Now you can watch my show whenever you want.
And what's next? What's after YouTube?
Well, I want to build with my Uncensored brand, I want to build out a genuine network. So I'm hoping to roll out things like History Uncensored and Crime Uncensored and Politics Uncensored and Football Uncensored, and roll out a genuine little media network stroke empire, which will be global with an emphasis on the American market. And I think I've got a very good chance of doing it. You know, like I say, we've got massive success with my own channel, Piers Morgan Uncensored. It is the way that the world is now watching stuff if you're under 45. 75% of my audience is under 45. And I think it's the future. You're going to see a lot more individuals like me now doing the job that networks were doing for a lot of employees. And, you know, if I were you, I'd have a go yourself.
On that bit of advice, Piers Morgan, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.
Nice to see you.